All right, you wanted to do a segment on the biggest draft mistakes. Do we have a time frame here? This is just last couple of years,
last 5 years was an article that Mike Renner had up on the website. So I think, we've talked a little bit about the start of free agency, but it's draft season now, officially. Every team is looking for the draft. So for the draft, you got to start with, what are the biggest screw-ups recently?
Is Trubisky over Mahomes out of reach here? That's 6 years ago?
6 years, yeah.
So that's one.
Well, it's not in the article, so.
Not in the article. All right, what else? What do you have? What do you have from the article here?
So, from the article, Hayden Hurst over Lamar Jackson for Baltimore. This is a controversial one because ultimately the Ravens got Lamar Jackson anyway. But they drafted Hayden Hurst over Lamar Jackson. This gets whitewashed a little bit as history progresses. And you're like, well, everybody screwed this up except Baltimore, who drafted Lamar.
Yeah.
On the other hand, they also passed on him for a tight end that isn't good. That's pretty bad.
Yeah. Unless...
No, stop it. You're not going to tell me that they were playing the game and knew they could get it. Stop it.
They knew the board.
No.
They knew the board. I like to call this less a draft mistake and more the reminder, right? The reminder
that everybody knows nothing.
Yeah, that everybody picks the wrong player at some point. I mean, that's why the analytics nerds focus so much on the process, right? That's why it's like they hate talking to the film guys because the film guys are like, oh, look at this guy wrong arm and power and doing this and that. The film guys don't say that, but look at this thing that the guy does, and it's like, you don't know anything, Twitter film guy. You don't know anything. You're not going to pick players better than the next Twitter film guy, and certainly not better than the NFL teams that can't pick guys. So what you got to just maximize picks and value and pick high value positions. So if you do hit, you get the right positions. That's where I kind of agree with the nerds. Trust, process picks. Yeah, this is a good one. Like if you're just talking, you picked the wrong player.
Yeah,
you would say that's a mistake. Hayden Hurst over Lamar Jackson.
I mean, I think
there's an outside chance though. Outside chance that the information that they're privy to, that we're not, that they knew Lamar Jackson would be available later. Of course, they had to trade up to get him, and it's more draft capital, so in the end, it's a loss.
That's the thing. You had to trade up to make it happen, so you weren't that willing to let's let it play out. We can get Lamar later. You know what I mean? And if a quarterback is involved in this whole dynamic, I think you almost need to eliminate all risk, which is why, as much as I'm endlessly curious how long Kenny Pickett would have lasted if Pittsburgh didn't take him at 20, and for all I know, that would have been the third round, I still don't have any criticism whatsoever of taking him there. Pittsburgh needs a quarterback. The quarterback is there. We're not screwing around. We're drafting this guy at 20, because if somebody takes him, now we're down to these guys that we think stink and have no shot of working out. So we take him at 20.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I also think Hayden Hurst at the time, by the way, remember, we thought that was the year that we thought Maurice Hurst was one of the best players in the draft, but he had the heart issue.
Yes.
And Maurice Hurst, we heard Hurst was going. Were you with me, or was I with Renner that year?
I don't remember.
Live on SI. They told us Hurst finally goes, and we're like, yeah, Hurst off the board.
Yeah.
And it was Hayden,
right,
who most people expected to go late day 2.
Also,
that's
by the way,
other part of this.
Well, yeah, compounding the mistake was drafting. I mean, not compounding it, but highlighting the mistake was drafting Mark Andrews a couple of rounds later, who ends up being twice as good, as many times as good as.
Never draft a 25-year-old former pitcher in the first round.
I would never.
Hayden Hurst.
Okay, the most obvious one probably over this period: Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson.
Yeah,
it's just a whoops, just a whoopsie.
You get the wrong guy.
Yeah.
And
the thing is,
and we're not being critical of. This is all hindsight analysis.
Yes.
Now, there were definitely Eagles fans and other people at the time who said that was a massive mistake at the time. This is complete hindsight analysis. We're not saying we would have had this better at the time. This is just hindsight.
There were also many people that had Reagor over Justin Jefferson in that draft class. That was one that at the time was not crazy, but has been since proven to be ludicrous, because Reagor is very bad, and Justin Jefferson is arguably the best receiver in the NFL right now.
One of the interesting things to me is we love to do A/B analysis, right? We saw this player in this situation, then we saw him in that situation, therefore let's draw some conclusions. Fascinating to me that we will criticize quarterbacks for being in a great situation when probably nobody had a better situation than Joe Burrow his last year, right? He got to throw to
at LSU.
The two very best receivers in the NFL right now, top two,
right.
2 or 3, 4, right? Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. And it did not, and Joe Burrow was also awesome.
And by the way, other guys
right?
that got drafted.
Like Joe Burrow didn't make Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. They didn't make Burrow. They were all great, right? There are certainly other situations like Matt Leinart threw to all these first rounders, and maybe that was telling for his production. But we didn't get to do that with Joe Burrow. We talk about Tua and the Bama guys, right? The 4 first rounders that he threw to. It didn't matter in this particular situation. It's just interesting when the A/B analysis shows us nothing. It's just they were all great.
Well, that one in hindsight is a really interesting one to kind of pore over because on the one hand, you have Justin Jefferson who's being thrown footballs by, Joe Burrow and these superstars at quarterback. You have the fact that he's sort of been marginalized. He's been sort of relegated to a slot role because Jamar Chase is so good on the outside. You've got question marks about whether he does as well as the alpha guy on the outside, et cetera, et cetera. And then the flip side, you've got Jalen Reagor, whose quarterback was a joke, like awful. So half of the targets sent Jalen Reagor's way. You're like, this is pointless. I can't get anything out of this because the ball is nowhere near him. You've got him excelling on the outside, but in the Big 12 where defense is optional and all this kind of stuff. So it's just this. It shows how difficult it is sometimes because you're not even close to evaluating like for like. It's like on the one hand, you got a guy with a great quarterback situation and a great offense, but working against really good defenses and with the confounding factors of like Jamar Chase on the outside. And then the other guy, you got terrible quarterback situation against bad defenses, but shows spectacular athleticism and blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's a nightmare trying to do this stuff sometimes.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson was fantastic on film, but you also said like, man, playing in the slot, running, wide open a lot.
Right.
It was like, okay, how much of his production is scheme-based? And those were the questions at the time.
All right. A couple more just complete misses.
I found a really good one that Renner had in the article, too. I want to add when you're done.
Billy Price for the Bengals.
Yeah.
Oops. Isaiah Wilson for the Titans might be the biggest oops in terms of just like we drafted just the wrong guy.
Price went right behind Ragnow, right? In 2018.
Right? Yeah.
So that was, let me just add to that, right? There were the Bengals and Steelers, I feel like, made the same mistake in back-to-back drafts, where the Steelers really wanted William Jackson III.
Yes, one pick after Ragnow.
So there you go. So the year before, William Jackson gets picked. He was the first-round player. Steelers wanted him. He goes to the Bengals. Steelers felt like a panic move to go with the next corner on the board, which is Artie Burns. Didn't work out. Same thing. Lions get the top center in the draft, Frank Ragnow. Bengals needed a center. Next pick, they go Billy Price. Both of them felt like reaches, and they were need picks, right? It was like, I need this position. Let me get this guy who probably shouldn't have gone at that spot. So, yeah, Billy Price did not work out for the Bengals, other than getting B.J. Hill, who had a couple plays that led them to an AFC championship. So.
And then one I think that has to be on this list now is San Francisco trading 3 first-round picks to get up to number 3 for Trey Lance. Now,
could have just waited for Brock Purdy.
So here's the thing. I don't think this is even an indictment necessarily on Trey Lance. Trey Lance may end up becoming a good player. We were tremendously excited, and still are to an extent, about the prospect of what Trey Lance can be within a Kyle Shanahan offense. But I think the subsequent time has shown he doesn't need that. Like, he just didn't need to trade 3 first-round picks to install whatever quarterback he wanted to install in that offense. Obviously, Brock Purdy has shown, what can be. I'm not saying you just draft any old stooge in the 7th round, throw him into the Kyle Shanahan system, and you get, magic happening. But I think it's clear you don't need to trade 3 first-round picks to go and get any one unicorn to get absurd production in this offense. Like, if they had stayed where they were in that draft and just taken a quarterback or, signed somebody random, like, evidently you can create something pretty magical without investing 3 first-round picks in it.
If they stayed, they would have had Mac Jones or Justin Fields available.
Where did they come from? 12?
I believe. Mac Jones certainly would have been there. Fields went at 11 or 10, right?
11.
So, I mean, I said it throughout the playoffs. I think Mac Jones absolutely could have done what Brock Purdy did.
Yes.
And been the first contract quarterback that they wanted.
I mean, Mac Jones, theoretically, within this offense, I think, could be pretty amazing. Like, the things that he excels at are the things that Kyle Shanahan really wants for that offense, i.e., always knowing where to go with the ball, really quick decision-making, accuracy. Now, he probably doesn't have the stuff that Brock Purdy is adding on top of that, the kind of escapability and second chance plays that are actually adding quite a lot of like EPA type stuff to that offense. But he might not need it. Like, he might just be efficient enough that the offense hums anyway.
So that's why we theorized that they weren't trading up for Mac Jones, right? The only benefit, if they were trading up for Mac Jones, was to get a Jimmy Garoppolo type on a first contract and presumably more
Not
durable,
injured, yeah.
right? But it did make sense to us. If it was a Trey Lance, even though I didn't think Trey Lance was the third best quarterback in the draft, it did make sense if they were going to get a Trey Lance or a Justin Fields, if they're going to add a running component to that offense and try to hit home runs, right? Try to really maximize that offense. That made sense at the time.
Yeah.
There's two that Renner highlighted in here in this article. This was well researched by Mike. You know,
Don't be so surprised.
I'm just saying. Just a reminder. Sometimes he does good work.
He does. He puts in the hours. Don't undermine him with your tone.
Two that were well researched in his biggest draft mistake of the past 5 years article. He went with the Lions, right? So this is where he didn't mail it in. He said, let's go back and look at the Lions' top 50 picks from 2018 to 20. And so the mistake was disregard for positional value in the Bob Quinn era for the Detroit Lions. Remember they had that first draft where it was like, we are going to establish the run.
Yeah.
They drafted a running back and a fullback and a center. So their top 50 picks, they had 6 picks in the top 50. Center, Frank Ragnow. He's awesome. It's a center, but he's great. After that, Kerryon Johnson, second round, running back. Tight end TJ Hawkinson at pick 8. Linebacker Jelani Tavai at pick 43, second round. Cornerback Jeffrey Okudah. That's positional value, fine, just a miss. And then running back DeAndre Swift at pick 35. So they spent 2 second rounders on running backs, a second rounder on a linebacker. None of them, well, I mean, Swift is a pretty good player, whatever. Hawkinson at tight end. Renner's a big anti-tight end in the first round type of guy anyway. Tight end at number 8 overall. A bunch of those players are playing elsewhere right now.
Yeah, so it's bad multiple ways. It's bad because they missed on a lot of those players, but it's even worse because they spent really high picks on positions that aren't high value. Like, they just targeted players that don't necessarily move the needle, even if they work out.
And then the other thing he highlighted was the big mistake the Texans made was simply turning the keys over to Bill O'Brien.
Yeah. I mean, so it was an interesting article because a lot of them were just, you picked the wrong player or you drafted X over Y or you did whatever. But a lot of them were more, nebulous concept-wise, like just turning the keys over to Bill O'Brien. So I think another one, I don't know if this is in his article actually or if it's just what I'm thinking now, but obviously basically everything the Raiders did was a mistake in the last 5 years. They, hiring Mike Mayock out of the NFL Network studios to be your GM was probably an error. Whatever the dynamic was between Mayock and John Gruden was a mistake. The totality of what that produced in terms of first-round draft picks was one of the biggest train wrecks that NFL history has ever seen in the draft. And, somewhere in amongst all that, they got Max Crosby. That's basically the story of the Raiders.
Crosby was great. Yeah, they had 5 first-rounders in 2019 and 20. The only one who started for them last season was running back Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
And Jacobs is a fantastic player, but again,
even the absolute best thing you can say about that is the best player they got out of those high-end is, arguably the lowest value position.
Yeah, I know, Ryan. Mike Renner is a national treasure, but we can razz Mike.
A national treasure might be taking it.
It's a little too much. In some circles, though. Maybe some bachelorette blogs and stuff like that. Maybe he is.
How many treasures do you have to be before, or do you have to have before Renner makes that list? He was 13th in his own season. There's been a lot of seasons.
Ran into our friend Clay Harbor, my friend Clay Harbor at the airport. I can't remember where Clay finished.
There's a lot of we thought the airport was going to be hell.
You going to name drop who was just slumming it like us at the airport?
We thought the airport was going to be hell because basically the entirety of the football world is trying to get the hell out of Phoenix in the same 24-hour period. Some people bounce straight from the game, the Super Bowl, to the airport to get the hell out of there as quick as possible. So we arrived at the airport many hours in advance of when we needed to be there. Even more hours when you consider that our flight kept getting delayed in the process. But so that everybody's just sitting there waiting, at various gates waiting for their flight to go. And it's just fascinating the number of people that you see like big people that you would expect to have some sort of higher class method of flight than us just, waiting at the gate. I saw Ed Reed chilling, and I almost went and asked him, said hey and asked him for a photo just because Ed Reed. But number one,
we should have stopped.
He was like hip deep in phone calls, right? Presumably by design so that people don't do that. But then at one point, Charles Woodson rocks up and just starts having a chat with Ed Reed. And you're like, what the hell? There's like a Hall of Fame meeting class happening out here. We saw our friend Darius Butler was there waiting for his flight.
Not a Hall of Famer, but
I saw Dr. Disrespect, whoever the hell that is, some YouTuber with 4.5 million followers. He was just chilling there outside our gate. There's all kinds of people.
How do you know Dr. Disrespect? You only know him because of the FanDuel party.
Yes. That's 100% how I know him, is that he was part of the FanDuel party that we didn't get into.
Oh, I didn't think you were going to bring that up.
Well,
it's a little embarrassing.
I don't think it was our fault. I don't. I think we had many methods of getting tickets, and then apparently none of them came through.
The invite-only party sold out somehow.
Yeah.
They gave out too many invites.
Right.
And then, you're a regular on one of the top FanDuel shows, Up and Adams, every single Friday. You're a regular.
I'm sure that
couldn't even get us in.
I'm sure that wasn't their fault. But
I've got my FanDuel friends. Couldn't get us in.
But the point being, it wasn't our fault either. So I'm fine with bringing it up.
So we went to the shake bar.
We had a milkshake, yes.
Milkshake bar.
We had, in fact, 2 milkshakes, lest anybody think that we were sharing.
Oh, yeah. We each had one of our own.
In some sort of 2-straw scenario.
We almost had one because I almost had 0, actually. I knocked the whole table down.
You did.
Which was shocking. So you'd only heard of Dr. Disrespect because it was his YouTube channel that hosted the FanDuel party because he has 4 million subscribers.
Mere days before, I had seen him on camera and therefore went, oh, look, that's Dr. Disrespect, whoever the hell that is.
Was that the first YouTube legend that you've recognized out and about?
Yes.
No, like Logan Paul or Jake Paul or whoever the...
Have never seen the Paul brothers or what's that guy, Mr. Beast? Haven't seen him around.
Don't know him.
Yeah. He's the largest YouTuber
Brett Coleman,
in the world.
Maybe we ran into Brett Coleman.
Oh, that's true. I saw Brett
YouTube
Coleman
legend
before.
right there. Not at Dr. Disrespect's level, but close. Good to catch up with Brett over there. But yeah, we if we didn't say it Sunday night, we are dead smack in the middle of the hierarchy of NFL personnel out there.
We are firmly in the middle class of the NFL landscape.
Got invited to some nice parties and some good stuff. Did not get invited to some really good parties. Did not get the invites to the good stuff.
Commissioner didn't send us an invite.
Did not.
Raj.
No.
Raj didn't send us one.
Nope. No commissioner's party for us.
No.
No Maxim party.
Nope.
Didn't get into some of the big ones. Didn't go
there was
to the
also
Super
a lot
Bowl
of
breakfast.
I was going to say
breakfast.
There were a lot of meals we didn't get invited to. Luncheons, breakfasts, a lot of Super Bowl breakfast, Super Bowl lunch, Super Bowl dinner. None of those.
Yeah. But shout out to the people that did invite us.
But we did get to. Well, I did get to see a guy with a poo dog.
You got the poo dog.
Yeah.
Could check that out from Sundays.
And you had a ton of wings.
All right. So that's it. Good show.
Yeah.
Good show.
We're over the draft mistakes. That's the end of those.
Oh yeah. Oh, did you? I have a draft mistake actually.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to add one to the mix here.
Do it.
Trayvon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson.
Oh, wow.
Is it too early to say that?
Probably. Yes.
I think that was a mistake.
It's a case of confirming your priors, right? Because we would have said it was a mistake at the time, and it almost certainly did. And a year later, you're not going to be any less convinced of that.
1 year in, just looking at grades and WAR numbers, Hutch was much more valuable than Trayvon Walker. Look, it's not a crazy mistake or anything like that. I am still interested in Trayvon Walker's development because he's a freak show.
Yeah.
But he has the same issues that we saw on tape. Even if it happens in year 3 for him to break out, will he actually surpass Hutchinson as a player? I don't know.
But this is also the question is, again, how much of how high would he have gone? How much of the whole hype surrounding Trayvon Walker was simply the news that Trent Baalke and Jacksonville were in love with this dude, and therefore, watch out, guys, he's going to go number 1. Because you rewind a year. I was talking to Seth about this when he was filling in for you for a few shows. There was no talk of this guy going high at all. This time a year ago, he was starting to get into the first round of conversations.
So Dane Brugler, I think, was the first one I saw of The Athletic. We want to get Dane on the show here for a long-form conversation at some point. I think had him in like the top 15.
Right.
And Dane does a really good job of being the first one, not from some of his evaluations, but some are just hearing from the league. Daniel Jeremiah does a lot of this too. Like first to just put new names into top 32s and all that stuff. He was the first one I saw Trayvon Walker top 15-ish.
And so that's when this first started to happen, is you started to get the Dane Bruglers of the world start to put this guy in the first round. But before that, we're talking about a second round player with insane athleticism that people are, going, hey, that guy's got some tools, blah, yeah. Then at the draft, or the combine rather, in a couple of weeks, the conversation was Aiden Hutchinson versus Evan Neal for number 1, right? And then a week or two later, then the news started to come like, Trent Baalke loves this guy. Like Jacksonville are talking about Trayvon Walker at 1. And I was like, really? 1? Like, okay, I could get middle of the first round because the dude just posted a combine that nobody else has ever seen before. But 1? So you sort of asked the question, okay, take Jacksonville out of the equation. Trent Baalke doesn't exist. The Jags are not sitting there debating Hutchinson or Trayvon Walker. How high would Walker go? Just in a normal,
if the Jags didn't
all
take
things
him.
being equal scenario where everybody else is just independently evaluating him, was the entire thing a product of Jacksonville and Trent Baalke specifically? Because if it was, that's quite a mistake.
He probably goes in 10 to 20 range.
Right.
I'm thinking.
So if they drafted a guy,
it's not a draft. It can't be on this list of huge mistakes, probably.
But it's a pretty big mistake, right?
Yeah, but if you miss on Trayvon Walker versus Hutchinson, I don't know if it's.
I'm just saying,
it's not like a quarterback thing or even a receiver thing. But I did think Hutchinson was the guy that you should take at 1.
But if you did draft a player that everybody else would have taken 20 at number 1 overall, just immediately, that's quite a mistake.
Yeah.
Unless you're immediately proved correct and he's a superstar, which hasn't happened yet.
Here's why I'll say that too. I looked at the history of my draft model. Trayvon Walker, a 40th percentile player in the model. 0 of those players have become elite, and only 3% of them have become even solid using our PFF WAR metric. So, depending on how you look at it, Walker was a long shot. Hutchinson, much more of a sure thing. And that was part of the discussion, right? Chasing the upside.